Okay, so we're at the top of Amud Nun Aleph. And yesterday we began the section that started towards the bottom of Amud Mem Tes, which was based on the pasuk Kavod Malchus Himeru V'Raschi Daberu. That in order for there to be a Kavod Malchus, in order for there to be the Levush of Malchus, in order for there to be the Isis Hadibur of Malchus, that they should be in a state of yeshus, such that they're able to conceal the Eir of Atzilus, which makes it possible for there to be the creation of Eilam Biyah. That's because of Gevurah Sucha, because of the Gevurah of Zoh. Meaning to say that through the Tzimtzum Ha'oir that allows for or facilitates the emergence of the Oisius in a manner of yeshus. So we explain by way of mashal in a person they have haskalah chadosha, they have a new creative idea, but in the initial stage of that creative idea there are no oisius. But not the pshat, there's no oisius. There's no oisius that are discernible. There's nothing that in the conscious mind is able to identify oisius, characters that can define the creative point. It's only afterwards in the process of analysis that oisius begin to emerge. A person is conscious of their oisius, which is the oisius of machshava. Yeah? Now, we associated that with another mashal of water and the offer that you find in water after it's boiled, even though it's originally not discernible, but afterwards it becomes discernible. So through a tzimtzum in the mayim, you're able to discover the things that were previously hidden and concealed. So in this sense, the oisius are always there. It's just there's a difference between when the oisius are in a state of helen behester or bedakus, and or when they become in a state of yeshus. So we're going to continue along this line of reasoning and to spell it out to a greater extent. Okay? So top of Amud Nun Aleph. V'yuvan zeh b'derech prat yoser. So to understand this in greater detail. Mimasha onu royim b'pratiyos. Again, another onu royim, another attempt to draw from personal experience. Inyan chiluki ha'oisius sheb'nefesh. A person can discern themselves and is aware themselves of there being different types of oisius in the self. A person comprises many different types of oisius. What would fall under the category of oisius? Versions of oisius. Kamoi, the most obvious distinction is the oisius hadibun, the oisius machshava, which we've already talked about at length till now. V'yadua, so it's well known. The oisius machshava in chitzenis bina, that the sort of the location, if you will, of the oisius of machshava. Where did the oisius of machshava develop? That's in chitzenis bina. V'yesh kamkin oisius b'pnimis bina. But you'll find, even though the oisius of machshava are from chitzenis bina, so what we described before, what do we mean by that? When we said before about chokhmah and bina, creative mind, the analytical mind. In the creative mind, there's no oisius. In the analytical mind, there are oisius, the oisius of machshava. These oisius are more specifically in chitzenis bina. But in pnimius bina, there are also oisius. And so too in chachma, like we said just last time. In chachma, there's also oisius. It's just their behelim. V'harotzin, also in rotzin, there's oisius. B'kulam yesh oisius. At every stage, there are oisius. And this is a very important line. Ki shum gilu oir b'li oisius. There cannot be a gilu oir of any sort without oisius. What do you think that means? What are oisius?
What do they represent?
What are oisius? What is the function of an oisius? In our context, what are we using oisius on? Oisius are makabel. Oisius are a levush. Oisius are a kli. So you can't have a Gilu Oir bli Oisius. What does that mean?
Well, to have revelation, you have to have something by which to reel it with.
Or that a revelation is a form of Keli. If there was no Keli for the revelation, then it wouldn't be a revelation.
In order for the revelation to be a revelation, it's revealing something. That thing has to have some definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be distinctive from a different gilui. Every gilui is a gilui of something, such that it's not the same gilui as another thing. The function of a gilui is not the etzem. It's a ha'ara min ha'etzem, like we've explained. The ha'ara min ha'etzem needs oisios. It needs receptors. It needs kalim in order to be definable, distinguishable, functionable. Every Gilu Oir, has within it oisius to an extent, to some extent or another. This is what I was trying to explain to you at the beginning of yesterday's shir, that when we think about Gilu Oir, we shouldn't think about it as two makeres. We shouldn't think about it as two faucets. They're coming from the same mocker. They come out together. They're not two parallel modes of divine expression. What? Gvul and bli gvul, gilu and helam, oir and kalim. Whatever label you want to give it. These two keiches, these two yecholies, these two abilities, which is within Elokus, are not exclusive to each other, are not separate from each other. They're not like the English faucets, separate, hot and cold. It's all one thing. All comes through the same. The difference is the maziga. The difference is the sort of the makeup, what percentage of which percentage of the other, what's dominant, what's not dominant. But all Gilu Oir has to have oisius. They don't exist outside of each other. There's no such thing as Oir and Kli. They have different kairos. Okay, fine. We're talking about Sheirush Shemokeh, but in their function, they function together. Okay? So we're sort of using the term oisius in a much broader sense, not just in oisius hadibur of Malchus, but oisius is, broadly speaking, the ability to be mailim or master ala oir, or in a way of being a keli for it. Yeah? So ef shel gilu oir bli oisius. V'yadua, the ha'oisius yesh them sheirush u'makom yuchad b'fnei atzmei. But that's not the pshat that the oisius are a product of the oir, because it's known that the oisius, they have their own distinct sheirush u'makom. V'lo shemei ha'oir v'hagilu nishave guf metzias oisius. The actual oisius are not a product of the oir and the gilui. Ela sheyesh oisius b'etzem ha'nefesh. The oisius are to be found in the etzem ha'nefesh, like we said all the way back in Amud Ches. Shehanefesh meleya oisius, umisham u'sheirush kol oisius. That's where is the sheirush of all these oisius. Ela shegilui ha'oisius hu al yidei ha'oir v'hagilu me'hanefesh. This is exactly what we said before. From where are the oisius produced? They're produced from the oir. As the oir is misamsim and is contained, the oisius are able to emerge in a manner of mitzvah. So the gilu ha'oisius is al yidei ha'oir v'hagilu me'hanefesh. Yeah, that was our main point at the beginning of the section, right? Al yidei sha'oin misamtze ve'enim me'er begilu, al yidei ze nasim ha'isius bebechinas yesh. Avol, lo yishe mizeh hu etzem mitziusam v'sabusam. But we're not going to get confused and say, how does this fit in with everything we said beforehand? I think what we were talking about in the first and second Maimah was about how Asius have a Sheirish Meyuchad B'fnei Atzma, which is higher than the Sheirish of the Oy. But the Metzias HaOsius, meaning, sorry, not the Metzias, the sort of the Gilui HaOsius, is dependent on the Oy. And we're going to give a proof of this now. V'haraya lazeh. Shari onu royim sheyesh mishahu chacham gadol la'atzmei. What do we find sometimes? Again, onu royim. We find sometimes that there can be a huge chacham, someone who himself has great intellectual ability. He's able to understand lots of different things for himself. However, but is incapable of explaining it to someone else. Why? Due to their lack of asis. They don't have the letters, they have the words to describe the things that they understand. Even though they for themselves understand concepts, they are incapable of communicating that to another. So this is a proof that the Oisius are not a product of the Oir, because this person has lots of Oir. And if the Oisius were produced, created, invented by the concepts and the ideas, then this person should also be able to have an abundance of ability to communicate ideas. But they don't necessarily correlate. And the fact that they don't correlate indicates that it's not a simple case of illa va'alu. If you have lots of seichel, if you have lots of creativity and analytical thought, you're going to be able to automatically communicate that to another person. There's no illa va'alu over there. Just because you're very clever doesn't mean you're going to be a great communicator of the ideas that you understand. And now we're going to go into a lengthy bracket, which is, I want to go past the bracket to the end of the paragraph on the next page, and then go back to the bracket.
But surely if the guy is very smart and he doesn't necessarily have Asius due to his seichel, but surely has Asius due to his atzem. Why are you just saying that the gil of the
He does have. We're going to see this in the paragraph, in the brackets. That for sure every nefesh is malei Asius.
Has, but it's not the gil.
It's not begilui. Okay, so if we can just so we can get the flow of this, sometimes we can get confused here with the flow. So we just said, sorry, he hasn't, just because he has seichel doesn't mean he has dibur, the communication of the idea. So if you go to the end of the paragraph on nun beis and 4 lines from the bottom, v'chein muvan, yeah? V'chein muvan mima sha'ilem eino yochel ledaber. And so too it's understood from a person who is a mute that they're not able to speak. Even though that person is able to think and conceptualize and analyze and have and emote and have all of the keichos hanefesh, it doesn't automatically then translate that they're able to speak. Okay, so that was the point of this paragraph. Then we're going to go into the bracket now, which adds a lot of nuance. So back to Nun Aleph, the beginning of the bracket, Umikol Mokim. You with me? Umikol Mokim, Gam la'atzmoi, Yovin es hadova bekitza v'loi behercha v'ripratim. it's definitely true that these two things are distinct. The personal understanding of an idea and the ability to communicate it to another. But nevertheless, if a person is incapable of communicating ideas to someone else, it's a sign that they themselves also don't understand the concept in the broadest sense of the term. With sort of broad application of the ideas. Why? Because if it's identified in this person that they lack the communication skills of speech, it's a telltale sign that also when it comes to their machshava, they have a limited ability when it comes to putting oisius, even oisius hamachshava, to the concepts that they are dwelling on. Because when a person lacks oisius, when a person lacks the communication skills to be able to share an idea, broadly that means that notwithstanding the fact that in the etzem hanefesh they have oisius, hanefesh malaya oisius, like we've said, those oisius are sort of unresponsive. They're not in a state of expression. They're remaining concealed and hidden within the self, and they're not in a state of hemshekh, we call it here. They're not in a state of hemshekh. They're not in a state of expression. Because when a person has a very in-depth and broad understanding of a concept, it's inevitable that it has to become enclosed in oisius. Not that it is the source of those oisius, but rather as we described in the process of chachma to bina, from the creative mind to the analytical mind, that the greater the extent of the analysis means there has to be oisius for it to be expressed in. Otherwise, there's no real analysis going on. Because if there wouldn't be oisius, then the analysis would not be able to be as broad to the extent that we're describing here. Yeah? So this is in a sense like a caveat to what we said before, that we want to show that the oisius hadibur are not a product, do not originate in the person's seichel. It's not a manner of illa v'olu, of cause and effect. They both have their own origin. They originate from their own makedos. But at the same time, they are intertwined. A lack of oisius in dibur is an indication of a lack of oisius in machshava. Because the only way you can truly understand something in a broad sense is if you have a lot of oisius in machshava. Otherwise, the oir is not able, doesn't have any mode in which to express itself.
Surely there is limits and gvul to the amount Dibur can express itself. As in, Dibur itself is also limited, and some things it just can't explain. So you don't see how much Dibur can portray.
No, if you understand something, there's no reason.
But perhaps an emotion or experience, which sometimes Dibur just can't explain it.
Let's not first go into emotional things. But, yeah, and therefore what?
Therefore, perhaps the reason why I can't explain ideas because it's just too aloof to be explained. Dibur does the vocabulary.
He might not be able to explain it as well as he can understand it. But what we're talking about is the type of person Pasha not able to. We're not saying that he'll be able to explain it in a way that he can understand it himself, but to explain it, he can explain it. Okay. To some extent. So we say in another little bracket within a bracket, v'sherish ha'inyan hu kanal ha'isius mamshichim es ha'oir leis labish bahem ulazais beheda hamshachas ha'isius mimekeiram ein nimshach ha'oir. So this is because the isius are the means by which the oir is able to be expressed. So if you don't have, if a person's isius hanefesh are not in an outward mode, then there's no means by which the oir can express it. Because we said, what did we say? The isius enable for that to be a gilu oir. ולכן באויר שאינו בא בהסלבשוס באיסיס כל כך הוא בחינת עיר החוכמה מאס גם שאינו איסיס כל כך חולי. So a person who we've identified as being a poor communicator, we've said that it's an indication that they also have a poor grasp in Isis HaMachshava too, which is in the Isis HaMachshava in Bina, which is in the analytical process of understanding the concept. So when it comes to the type of intellect that doesn't require Isis so much, which is the intellect of Chachma, the creative mind, there this individual is not so handicapped, because Isis are not not such a dominant aspect, even though we said even in Chachma there are Isis, but the Isis are the Elam, and they're not as a dominant feature as the Oir. The Oir is much more dominant. So for such a person, that is that works quite well. I want you to now skip. We're gonna just to do this because this 3 goes a long way. If you're going to go to the end of paragraph Nun Beis, on Amud Nun Beis, the end of the paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom. Va'af shagam. So va'af shagam la'atzmai einay mevin rak bekitzur. So that person, we've said, they're not lacking in the creative process of Chachma. And even though they themselves only understand this concept Bekitzur, even that Bekitzur, they aren't able to reveal to somebody else. Why? They had their ha'isius, because they don't have the letters. Harizeh hira sheha'ika hu hachisorim ba'ha'isius. This indicates that the problem is that they don't have a good flow of Isis coming from the Nefesh, that koyach, that ability, is just not, is underdeveloped in that person. They have an underdeveloped linguistic self. Their linguistic self is stunted. It's not they can't speak. They're not an ilim. They're not a mute, but they still have a certain stunting. Mute is an extreme example of someone who has absolutely no Isis. Whereas this Chacham Gadol, who's able to be Mevin La'atzmai, he's a sort of a semi-mute. In a sense, he just doesn't have the Isis. Doesn't have the capacity to create the linguistic sequences through the Isis that would describe the ideas that he understands. Okay, sorry about this running backwards and forward, but I feel like this is the only way to do this bracket, because it's so now we have a bracket within the bracket. This is the bracket 3, which is now going to go all the way through to the end of 3, which is where we just started from, up to the Va'af Shagam. So if you go back, we're up to V'hagam d'lich'eira ein imuven. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So now we're going to question what we've just said. V'hagam d'lich'eira ein imuven. Now, however, isn't it seemingly not understood? T'lefi tam hanal, based on what we've just explained above, shaha oisius mamshichim es ha'oir, that it's these oisius which enable the oir to become expressed, meaning that the linguistic ability of a person is what is going to stimulate or make possible the expression of their bin or their analytical mind. So the problem should go all the way to the top. If our principle is that there's no such thing as a gilu eir without Asius, and if this person struggles with Asius, then they should struggle with Chachma too. How are they a Chacham Godel without Asius? Now, what I explained before we got to this bracket was that the Asius there are, I already gave the answer, the Asius there are not so dominant. So it's less of a imposition. So he says, so that's what I said. The Asius there are not so discernible, but still, nevertheless, there needs to be Asius. And if we're saying this person struggles with the expression of Asius, surely they should have a problem in Chachma too. So inyan hu the chisarim behed hamshachas ha'asius eine ba'ofen kozeh she'eina nimshech legamri. We're not talking about somebody who is a mute. This person does have hamshachas ha'asius. It's just not. It's just not as expressive as it could be. The person is a speaker. It's not like they can't speak. It's just they're not very articulate. Even when it comes to a person who's a mute, who isn't able to speak, even a mute has hamshachas esis hanefesh. How do we see that? They're able to think. Just because you can't speak doesn't mean you can't think. And in thinking, you have to have esis. If a person did not have any hamshachas ha'esis, they wouldn't have hamshach of anything. Because based on that principle, so if you're going to claim that a person wouldn't have hamshachas ha'esis at all, they wouldn't have hamshach of anything. There'd be a vegetable. There'd be no expression. The linguistic self is the means by which everything is able to emerge. So when it comes to a mute, they have a hamshachas ha'esis, and so too with al chacham gadol. It's just that the hamshacha isn't as good as it could be. Because the whole ultimate purpose of the Asius coming from the Etzem HaNefesh is they should emerge as discernible Asius in a state of Yeshus. That is the goal. Because the whole purpose of the Asius is what? To enable the expression of the Oy. The Asius Miloshan Va'asachuli. Asius is a sort of a means by which to carry and bring the Asius, the Oy, to the next stage. Like we've explained just above, that it's through the concealment of and the helm of the Asius, the Oy is able to be nimshach to the next madrega. So through like we were saying, that that Tzimtzum and Helam of the Isis Hadibur enable the Hamshacha of the Eir of Atzilus. But Gilu Eir Beli Oisius, and if you have a Gilu Eir which doesn't have any Oisius, Hainu Kasher Ein HaOisius Ma'alimim.
Do you want to do this bracket?
Yeah.
You skipped other ones before.
No, I didn't skip 5.
You did 5?
I did 4 and 5. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is because this is all within the same point. It's not like a whole separate section. When you have a Gilu Eir where there are no Oisius, which we said was impossible, so he quickly clarifies. Hainu kasher ein ha'oisius ma'alimim. When you have a gilui where the oisius are not ma'alim at all, kumay curl poshut, like in the case of a curl poshut, like you, if you look up in the Maimah, which we learned before the Tkiyas, it's like an O kloli. Harihu b'chinas makif levad. Merely a makif. The ein ze amitis hagilu chuli kumesh kosam makom acher. We don't even call that hagilu so much. I don't want to get into that now. We talked earlier about Kol Me'ira HaKavana. The Kol being, but here it's a whole different parasha. The main thing is that Isis, they should be in a state of yesh. Because that fulfills the objective. What is the objective? To have an expression of the nefesh. Can't have an expression of the nefesh without Isis. And the more that the Isis are mugoshim, the more is possible for the nefesh to be niskala and nimshach. The main area where it's noticeable that a person lacks in oisius, lacks in linguistic ability, is in the oisius mugoshim, is in those discernible letters. Machshava, someone's lack of ability, a bit more specifically in the oisius hadibur. So true, a person might have a weakness in the Oir HaChachma, in their creative mind because of their lack of Oisius, but you won't even notice it yourself because you don't even notice the Oisius there in the first place. So it's not so discernible. But broadly speaking, if someone doesn't have a good skill in explaining things, it's a good sign that they also struggle to understand things. Because it indicates a blockage, a limitation in the development of their linguistic self.
He has chokhmah.
He has, but even still, it's just we don't notice the limitations of his chokhmah. Because we don't notice there it's not even noticeable. So he himself doesn't notice the
He has chokhmah.
He could have, but there's a good chance that it's not as good as it seems. Even in Chachma. So let's just finish, even though we read this before when we went back. But Avshagam Latz meaning maybe Rak Bekitzu, Mikol Mokim Harigam Akitz and Yochel Legalis Luzulase. They had the Ha'isius, Harizayrosh, Iko, Chisarin, Baha'isius, Vezatolukol, and everything depends on that. The Chisarin in the Ha'isius is the main reason. And it's got nothing to do with the Eir. It's not the Eir HaSeichel. Because it's not a case of Ilah Va'alu, because there isn't Ilah, but there's no Alu. That's not the circumstances here. The Dibur is, the Isis HaDibur have their own Makir, and the relationship with the Eir is not that it makes them exist. It causes them to be. It might cause them to be the Eir. Well, as we explained, it causes it to be more prominent, more beyeshus, more behelim. That's what the Eir can determine. But the Eir cannot determine whether they're going to be Oisius in the first place. That's a whole different Seder. So too is we understood when it comes to the mute who's not able to speak. Even though he has all the keichs nefesh, and that which is considered an ilam to lack das, and is therefore exempt from all the mitzvahs. That also all of his other giluyim are not as they should be. It says that an ilam has a confused mind because the giluyim are dependent on the Isiyos. So therefore, someone who's an ilim is also going to struggle in other areas too. And that's why it becomes part of mitzvahs. Okay. So we're still trying to figure out, or we're still trying to explain, we're still within the sugya of explaining of Eichu mi'ayin noldu ha'isiyas. What have we said till now? That the Isiyas have their own Sherish Makim. They come from the Etzma Nefesh. Oh, and remember not to lose sight of why we're saying this. We want to understand how Malchus of Atzilus, which is called Dibur Ha'elyon, what is the manner and the nature and how is it able to be Mailim or Masti Lagamri on the Eir of Atzilus and produce and create Olam Esbiyah. So that's why we're going into this whole mashal of Dibur. So Dibur, we've said, has its own Sherish Makim. Oisius Dibur come from Etzma Nefesh. But, and automatically with every Gilu Eir, there are Oisius. I Eshel Shem Gilu Eir, B'li Oisius. However, the manner in which these Oisius are going, if they are going to be discernible or not, the Bechinas Yesh, you're going to be self-aware of these Oisius in Machshava and be capable of mobilizing them in Dibur is determined by the Oir itself. The Tzimtzum of the Oir allows for the emergence of the Oisius in a state of Yeshus. Okay? Umash is spoil the ill movement. So from all that we've explained above, it's now understood. She'ein metzias ha'oisios min ha'mitzos. That the letters themselves, the letters of speech, the phonemes, the sounds that we make for each and every letter, are not produced by the mitzos, the points of articulation, the places of articulation, the throat, the lips, the tongue, the palate, teeth, all the various places where letters are articulated. They are not the source of the Oisius. Because you might think that, what are Oisius? Oisius are just sounds which your body is able to make. Right? So your body is able to do lots of things. Your body is able to produce sweat. You have sweat glands on your body, right? So your sweat glands, if you ask the question, where does your sweat come from? Say it comes from your sweat glands. There's various other things in your body. Obviously, there's hormones, there's all different things in it. But why things would be produced in a certain way. But when it comes to speech, you could think that the letter ches is merely a sound which is able to be created by the throat. And base is a letter that's able to be produced because of the lips. But he's going to argue in this paragraph how, in fact, the oisios are not a product of these points of articulation. And you know the book I had it out, I was looking up the phonological mind, with that Geschmacka picture of the baby with the aleph base and the tefillin on it. So it's a very interesting argument that the mind, there it's talking about the mind. The mind already has a phonological sort of system even before a baby is even able to speak, about sound patterns and things. There's a certain coherence, there's a universal system of phonology that is coherent to the mind. So this can be seen in contemporary research as well. But the argument he makes over here is interesting. Kiyadua, it's known sheish heimitzois hamitziim oisis hadibu. So we have 5 places of articulation which produce speech. Yeah, you have the different letter groupings of the aleph base that come from different parts of the mouth or the throat. And that parallels a sort of a similar system of articulation, which is enables the production of the letters of thought. A person could think what? That if you make sound from your lungs, from your throat, and you sort of hit that sound against certain parts of your mouth, it produces sound. And that's the mocker of the oisius. That is what an ois is. An ois is just a phoneme that's produced. It's a sound that comes out of the body. And then the mind uses these sounds that it has, and it produces languages out of it. The language is produced as a result of the sort of the pre-existing, these existing tools of the sort of sounds that a body can make. When a body can make these sounds, you then use the ideas, you encode them into these sounds, and you put them together, and you create a system. So you could say there's no inherent reason why you should put this sound together with that sound rather than the other sound with that sound. It's all just arbitrary. But what he wants to argue over here is that actually there is a system. There is a coherence. The oisius already exists beforehand. These sounds aren't just a material product of the body, a sound wave that comes out from the body by making those sounds, but rather there is these oisius precede any articulation in speech. It's just that the body in this form, when you put this sound together with this point in your mouth, it becomes the keli for this ois. The physically articulated sound of speech is a keli for the already existing letter. It's not invented there. But you could think that it is invented there. If you put sound together with the throat, you get letters aleph, ches, hey, and ayin. In the same thing with all the others. This sort of, when we talk about oisius amachshava, what we might call a kola de lo yishtama, the sound you can't hear. They're sort of post facto realities. A person has seichel, a person has middos. There's no such thing as oisius. The oisius don't exist. It's only then, when you start thinking, the oisius become the kalim for these ideas. When you start speaking, those sounds become the kalim, the tools in which to articulate those ideas. No. Those oisius were always there in the concepts, because the shum gilu obli oisius. The oisius were always there. Just like the offer was always in the water. It's just the materialization of the letters is through the sound patterns in the mouth. They don't originate from there. They emerge over there, but they don't originate from there. But you could think that they do. It's just like a violin. You make it hollow, and you stretch over the nimin, strings. And the sounds that you can produce from the violin strings vary based on the sort of the way that they're arranged.
Length and width.
And by banging your finger on the strings, you'll get the different sounds that come out of the things. So your mouth, your vocal cords, and your points of articulation are basically a musical instrument that produces sounds. That's what you could think. That's what a person can think. He says very clearly, Ein hadova kain. It's not the case. That's not how it works. And he's going to give 3 arguments why it doesn't work. Like it says in the Igeres HaKedesh in Hey. Each one of the different points and places of articulation, they have multiple letters that come out of them. From the lips you get 4 letters, a base, a vav, a mem, and a pei. If you were to argue that it's all about just the sound hitting the lips, similar to the way you would play a violin. How would you get the multiplicity of letters that come out of a place of articulation from the same sound hitting the same lips? You should only be able to produce one sound. Argument number 1. From this it's understood that it's got nothing to do, the oisies are not a product, they don't originate from the mitzvahs. So you'll argue, what you're going to say? You're going to say that's a funny argument, right?
Depends how you hit a string, is what sound it's going to make. If you hit it hard, it'll be loud. If you're like...
Fair enough. Maybe that's why it gives more reasons. Va'oid, and furthermore, if you're going to argue that the letters of speech, the phonemes, are all originate from these points of articulation, you would then, in theory, need to intend to utilize the various points of articulation to produce the particular sound and phoneme you want. But anu royim b'chush, again, you don't concentrate and intend to say, okay, now I want this sound to come out of this moitza, and this particular sound from this moitza out of the various ones that can come out. But what does a person do? Let me just turn this off. But a person thinks he wants to say a certain thing. Machshava, he has in mind what he's going to say. And the points of articulation move in the manner that's needed to produce those letters. But it's not like playing an instrument where you intend to make this sound, then you intend to make that sound, that sound. The points of articulation respond, the mouth and everything, and the throat will respond to your desire to say particular words. Still not convinced, right?
Definitely not.
That's why maybe he gives another reason.
Imagine if a violin was your throat was a violin. Right. Even without ACS, people hit certain notes when they're nervous. You're nervous when you're like really scared. You might hit very high pitched notes.
Okay.
Right, and not even with ACS. Just like you talk it.
But we're talking about ACS here, so what's that got to do with anything?
Saying same thing with ACS. ACS is just a way of expressing yourself. People express themselves without thinking. Right? I mean,
precisely.
And that's
his argument, that you don't have to intention. You don't have to know how to play the instrument of human speech.
Or babies don't.
Hmm?
Babies don't.
They pretty much do. They have sound patterns that they can pick up straight away.
Right, and then they can express it, and therefore, because it's natural and they do it without thinking, therefore what?
No one teaches a baby. I mean, they make certain sounds that they need help with. But all in all, you don't have to teach them to produce sounds, produce phonemes, produce letters. You have to teach them to produce a letter. If they hear it, they know how to do it.
Okay, if they learn it precisely, just like you learn an instrument. If you learn an instrument, you can also play it with no.
All right, I can't help you with this one. I hear your pain, because these first two reasons, obviously I don't understand them well enough, because they don't seem convincing to me.
Right, and I'm sure he knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote them as well.
Yeah.
He knew
So
what.
I trusted it, but the third one is
Convinced.
is more. I think is easier to comprehend. Va'oid she'im nem shezeh min hamitzois harei ilam yesh lekol hamitzois kamei b'chol adam. A mute has all of the points of articulation just like a speaker does. And he's also able to make sound. Why is he therefore not able to speak?
Right. No clue.
I think that's a good argument. Ela behechrich leima. She'ein hamitzois sibba lahamtzois ha'isius. We must say that the mitzois, these points of articulation, are not a cause for the letters. It's not a sibba u'musubov situation. Ela sha'oisius heim be'etzma nefesh. A person is a linguistic self. A person is made up of letters. The points of articulation are just the mere kelim that enable the substantiation of those letters. And that's why you have multiple letters from the same point of articulation. Because these letters have an association with each other, even though they're distinct in their sound. They come from the same point of articulation, because when it comes to the Sheirush Oisiyos, these letters are associative. You don't need to concentrate how to produce these letters when you want to speak, because they're not the main reason why you have these oisios. To produce oisios, being able to, to have a moving lips, someone has like a swollen lip or something, they can't speak, or something, swollen tongue, or whatever it might be, or sore throat.
Swallowed.
A swollen tongue. Various different impediments that might restrict their speech. But ordinarily, if everything is functioning normally, a person should be able to produce words. Why are they able to produce words? Not because of the mouth, not because of the throat, more because of their own. The ideas that they want to share, are the main reason why they're able to produce oisios. The person has to concentrate on what they want to say. Because these oisios originate from the nefesh. Ve'hein sibus l'tznuos hamitzos, and they are the reason why you move your mouth in the way that you do, or you utilize the various aspects of your mouth and your throat to produce these letters. Shemamela hamitzos misnanim lohitzi ha'osis b'poel, and automatically the points of articulation respond to the letters and the words that you want to convey. And therefore, that's why a mute, even though they have a functioning mouth and throat and able to produce sound, they're nevertheless not able to speak. Because they don't have hemshachas ha'osis min ha'nefesh, like we explained above. Important bracket though, they're still able to bear children who can speak. How, why isn't Ilim able to have a child who's a normal speaking person? Because everyone in the Etzem HaNefesh has Asius, even the Ilim. Actually, just in the Ilim, it's concealed. It hasn't emerged from the self for him to be a fully linguistic person. And the ability to reproduce is a koyach atzmi in the person, like we explained at length in Yechinim Yumayim, that because of the Isha, she's able to be mamshech the Ator Lazar, she's able to be mamshech the hamshacha atzmis from the father. So if the father is an ilim, or the mother is an ilemis, the koyach ha'ilad is a koyach atzmi, both in the mother and the father. But here it's referring to the father. And so, since in the Etzem HaNefesh, this person also has Oisius, they're able to have children that have Oisius. And that's why he's able to have a child that can be a fully speaking person. Because that child might not have this inability to express the Oisius in the Nefesh.
Surely the Ilim has the Oisius in the Nefesh, and he has the physical ability, to speak. Just he's not able to be mamshech the oath from the nefesh to
Oisius from the nefesh.
Oisius, its actualities. If so, surely his child could, in the etim of the nefesh, might also have Oisius, but won't be able to produce that.
Very possibly, but it's not. Why should it be? It's not it doesn't determine that.
Why his father?
The father just gives over the inyan atzmi. The inyan ha'ilad is the inyan atzmi.
The father hasn't got the ability to take the Oisius from the etim. And
but that skill, that particular issue, doesn't necessarily have to be translated in the child, be repeated in the child.
But the father hasn't got that potential.
He has that potential. Why the person?
He has the Isis.
Why that person that hasn't got the hemshekh is not clear. Why that is the case?
Whatever normally does hemshekh isn't there in him. How would his child get that?
But that's not an Inyan Atzmi. That's an Inyan study. It's a superficial aspect of that person. It's not their self. The self is an Inyan, is nefesh with Mnei Oisius. The child can do better than the father.
So the Ilim does have the ability, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a long shtickle this. We'll continue next time. Yes.